Beautiful souls, friends and family, soul tribe, Venus lovers. Welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Danny, physician astrology, and I am going to show you why birthdays are so important to me. About 5 years ago, I had my astrology red pill when I realized that the astrology that I had been practicing did not match the actual sky. And I call it tropical derangement syndrome. And I'm not putting tropical down. I'm not putting any astrologers down at all. It's just for some people, when they realize there's a disconnect, they go into an incredible tailspin. They wonder what they have been doing their whole life. They wonder if they have been serving their clients in the best way possible because they haven't been necessarily practicing the actual sky. So it's a real thing. It really does happen. Some people that realize it are fine with it, and they make sure that they know that when they do their astrology. So I think it's really important to preface any kind of astrology work you do with the disclaimer of what you're actually using. Are you using Vedic, which kind of matches the sky? Are you using tropical, which doesn't match the sky at all? It's a completely different system. Or are you using constellational astrology? And so that's what we're doing here on my channel. That's what I want to show you. I want to give you the sense of what I went through on my birthday a few years ago. I wanted to know exactly where Pluto was because I hear a lot of different things, and it actually does depend on where you look. So I typed into where is Pluto transiting? And the answer that I got was Aquarius. Okay, so it says that it's been was in Capricorn for 15 years, and now it's in Aquarius, and you can get all this amazing well-written, well thought out energy. A lot of people are getting really, really ready for this event for Pluto to be in Aquarius. So it's super interesting. But then if you actually say, what constellation is Pluto in, you get Sagittarius. Okay. And Sagittarius is a completely different constellation. It's an entire constellation away from Aquarius because we have Capricorn in between Sagittarius and Aquarius. So I got really confused and I said, well, wait a minute, let me get out my stargazing app and let's see exactly where Pluto is. And so in Stellarium, I went ahead, stellarium-web.org, and I searched for Pluto because Pluto is a planetoid, so it doesn't actually show you the planets. Like, it shows you Saturn right here, but it doesn't actually highlight Pluto for you. But here's the crosshairs for Pluto, if you can see those moving. And you back out a little and you can see, wait, Saturn's in Aquarius, not Pluto. Pluto's right here. Pluto's actually in the boundaries of what we call Sagittarius. And next year we'll actually transit into Capricorn. So this is the rub with true sky sidereal astrology. We actually have to find out where luminaries are in the sky, where the energies are actually coming from. Let me show you another example. This is a transit chart from the 20th of November of 2027. And I'm going to get out my pen and I'm going to draw for you because I want you guys to see where this stuff is. So if we go down here, that is the symbol for Pluto. Pluto is in 0 degrees of Sagittarius on November 20th of 2007. Wait a minute, that was like 16 years ago, right? What's going on here? Let's talk a little bit about these energies and why they're important, because what we're doing here is we're reading mundane astrology. We're reading the collective transits. So Pluto transiting through Sagittarius is a very different energy over the past 15, 16 years than where they're saying Pluto is now. Here's Pluto in 0 degrees of Capricorn, and this is going to happen next year. Okay, so let's think back over the last 16, 17 years. What is Sagittarius, first of all? Sagittarius is, for the collective, is a area of the sky that describes our higher learning, our higher knowledge, our religious institutions, our institutions of higher learning, like college, esoteric schools, universities, getting your PhD, getting your doctorate, getting your shamanic license, all these things. Okay, this is what Sagittarius energy is. And I would say that over the last 15, 16, 17 years, indeed, our collective has gone through a tremendous shift in not only perspective, but how higher learning is practiced, how spiritualism is practiced, if we even believe in a higher spiritual existence anymore. All of these things have been coming in to question over the last 16 or 17 years. And for me, this feels very accurate. This does not feel like energy that's been going through Aquarius, because Pluto can be nasty. Pluto is tearing things down. And when Pluto starts to go into Capricorn, which is its next constellational sign energy that it's going through, which is our government, which is our striving for our highest ideals, which is our public image, our reputation, things like that. You can already kind of see some Capricorn changes happening. Older structures that are no longer useful are being transformed into something else or being done away with. And that's what's going to be happening during the 10, 11, 12 years that Pluto transits through Capricorn. Okay, so we need to get that point straight right off the bat where Pluto actually is.
Dr. Badass in the house. Yeah, I don't know if I'm a badass. I'm actually more of a lover than a fighter.
Look, there's my first YouTube thumbnail right there. Just kidding.
I'm going to show you exactly what I did when I first got started so that I could understand how the planets in motion right now were affecting my natal chart. I may or may not read it, but I'm going to show you how I did it. That way you guys can do that. So you can do exactly what I did, and you can grab your chart and you start reading and you start thinking about what that might mean for you personally. So what are aspects? Here's just some general ideas about aspects. This is why it gets confusing for people, because they will study the archetypes, they'll study all the signs, they'll study all the houses, they'll know all the planets, they'll know even what all these combinations mean. But then when it gets to aspects, it gets very, very confusing. So what I like to use the aspects for is to tell a story. So this is where you can actually sort of hone in your intuition, because what you're going to do is create one energy with the planet and the sign and the house. Then you're going to create another energy with the other planet, sign, and house. Whether they're conjunct, opposing, squaring, trining, it doesn't matter. You're going to have those two energies in your head. And then you're going to incorporate these general ideas as well as what the aspects mean on their fundamental level. Once you have those three pieces of energy, then you get an intuitive hit. That's what's supposed to happen. So like you take, I don't know, Mercury in Taurus in the first house, right? You've got this speaker that's very smooth, very easygoing, very in the moment, has a good sense of value, knows when something's worth something, even if other people might not. So that's that Mercury energy there. And then you've got Jupiter in the 10th house. I don't even know what, I guess that would be Aquarius. So then you have this square. So you have Jupiter in the 10th house in Aquarius squaring on this Mercury in the first house in Taurus. So what you think about Jupiter, this expansive, energetic, abundant, happy, spiritual energy in the 10th house, Aquarius, like big ideas, a spiritual leader, works in the spiritual realm, works on innovative ideas with this Mercury, but they're in a square. So how would you take those two? Would you take a challenge? Would you take a frustration? And that's how we're going to read these, essentially. So that's the process that you go through as an astrologer. And the instinct is to just kind of see that square and blurt it out. But you also want to look at the other aspects and take the whole story into consideration. And then there's certain geometries that you can hone in on, take all 3 points or all 4 points, whatever's in that geometry, and then tell the story. You want to definitely avoid polarizing any interpretation. Like if you are getting an intuitive hit that might be negative or shadow energy, you can speak that, but it's also good to say this could manifest as this in this situation, or it could also manifest as this when this is healed, when this is integrated, when, you can add in that based on your own life's experiences. But you definitely want to take into account the client's age. When you're speaking to someone that's 25 versus someone that's 68, the life lessons, the patterns that you see in the chart are going to be very different, especially if it involves planets like Jupiter or Saturn. A 25-year-old with a Saturn square something might be very different than a Saturn square for someone who's 68 because they've already gone through, two of their Saturn returns. So they're a little bit more mature. They hopefully at least they know things. Um, the faster moving planet aspects the slower moving planet. So the moon in a natal chart is never aspected by something else. The moon aspects everything else because it's the fastest mover when we're considering a basic natal chart. The next fastest mover would be Mercury. Mercury aspects the sun, Mercury aspects Venus, Mercury aspects Jupiter. Okay, so Mercury can aspect almost everything except the moon because the moon will aspect Mercury. Whereas everything aspects Pluto because Pluto does not aspect anything in your natal chart. Okay, it's different when we're talking about dynamic aspects, and I'll get into that in just a second. But basically, when you're thinking about the faster movers, they will aspect onto the slower moving planet. Now, there's a concept of major aspects versus minor aspects. We're going to get into all of it. I find that minor aspects will point out certain geometries that you really want to find in a natal chart. But if they don't, if they're just there in general, then they will also support the underlying story that you're developing with the major aspects. And the inner planets actually have a very unique situation when it comes to the aspects that they make. And we'll get into that as well. What is an aspect? Well, the way that you can conceptualize it is if you are standing in the middle of a circle or a sphere, and you've got the ecliptic belt around you in a 360-degree fashion, you are standing in the middle. If you look 90 degrees to your right or left, you are creating a square aspect with your original position. So if I'm standing here and I'm facing you guys, and then I turn to my exact right, I have made a square with respect to me and the 2 points that those lines hit the circle. So what it looks like is a line that's drawn from this point to this point. And I'll show you what it looks like in a chart right here. So this moon and south node are squaring in this chart because they create a 90-degree angle with respect to the center of this circle. So all the degrees are represented here. This is a semi-sextile. This is a semi-square. This is a sextile. So the major aspects are the 60-degree sextile, the 90-degree square, the 120-degree trine, and then the 180-degree opposition and the 0-degree conjunction. So if you see these degrees, that's what they mean. And this is the symbol that you'll see on the line between the points on the circle, which represent the planets. So this chart has a lot of really good examples, right? So you can see that Neptune and Pluto are in a sextile. In other words, if I'm standing in the middle of this chart, they are making a 60-degree angle with respect to the center and the points that they hit. And we draw that like that, and we put a little asterisk there. The squares have a square, and the trines have a trine. And these are, this is a quincunx right here, which is a minor aspect. That's the only one I like to use on a regular basis because it points out the shape of a yod, which I've talked about in other chats. But once you start tying the story together with these aspects and you get your intuitive hits, it's like something magical opens up. It's like you can almost see the person or feel their energy. It's really, really interesting. So this first one is oppositions. And if you just think of a seesaw energy, right? If you have too much of one thing, it's going to weigh it down and the other thing won't have enough. So what you want to do with an opposition is find the middle road of those two archetypes. You could also suggest to them, like, let's say you've got, what's a good one? Like Venus and Jupiter. Okay. So you've got the relationship energy, you've got the beautiful energy, you've got the creationship energy, always inspired, ready to like be on fire with passion and arousal. And then there's this Jupiter, which is expansive and spiritual. And so what would a balance look like? So if this was like an overly aroused energy with Venus, then we might not be able to expand. Whereas if we're overly expanded, if we believe too much, if we have too much faith, we could be somewhat gullible and led into some sort of bad situation. And so the idea is to kind of tamp it down, bring Jupiter to the middle, bring Venus to the middle, and then those two energies will work very nicely in balance. So yeah, it can pull energy away from one polarity as well and weaken very strong placements. So if you've got like the perfect Saturn, which I don't know what that would be, but if you if you had like the perfect Saturn and then you've got an opposition, say, to Pluto, that can make it a tougher, more difficult energy for you. Venus and Mercury in a natal chart will never, ever, ever have an opposition to each other or to the sun. So you'll never have, oh, I have a Venus opposing sun in my natal chart or opposing Mercury. You'll never see that. They're always clumped together in one quadrant of the chart. One planet is on the other side. So you have one planet here and one planet here, which would be this Pluto and Moon example. So that's an opposition. Squares usually feel like, this is 90 degrees. This is the first example I showed you. This feels like an external catalyst. So this is a lesson in life that repeats itself until it's identified and resolved. And it can point to triggers or surprising events when transiting planets do a dynamic aspect to the natal energy. And my advice is always to use it constructively. Either accept what's going on, to let go of something you're holding on to finally make a decision to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable, because the square is always a little bit uncomfortable. If you look at the guy in this graphic here, he's done a great job painting the floor, but now he can't get out, right? So it can feel like being trapped. It can feel like something that always happens to you. If there's a certain cycle, like if it's a 5-year cycle or a 6-year cycle, it could be related to Jupiter. So it just really depends on what's going on in your own natal chart. And then again, with squares, Venus and Mercury will never form a square with the sun or with each other. They're just too close to each other to do that. All right. And then there's the geometry of the T-square. So if we have a square right here and an opposition and another square, then you get what's called a T-square. So we have two oppositions. This is a mystic square, which I think I talked about in a previous talk, but basically it's a life lesson. So when you have an opposition with two squares to another point, then you've got a major life lesson. That's what that looks like. And so it's one opposition, two squares. This is a major life lesson, a major tension that always repeats itself. And it's a non-constructive pattern. So it's just like with a regular square where you accept, let go, and decide, but then you use the other aspects to the points involved in the T-square for solutions and guidance, right? So how would you tell this story, right? There is Pluto squaring the nodes, for example. But we've got a sextile with Neptune and we've got a trine with Uranus. So what might that mean for that person? Because the skip step or the tension is always involving energy around spiritual power, which would be that Pluto there, and their destiny towards finding themselves and their knowledge of relationships. So there's power struggles here for this person. So how might they, attenuate that or learn from it? The lesson might be coming from Uranus over here in that nice aspect to Pluto. This is metamorphic transformation. This is freedom and power. So, this person may need freedom in order to use the power that they have in a constructive way, to really find out who they are. So you could read it like that. And then there's the mystic square. And that is this energy where you've got Pluto, Moon, and the nodes. This is a mystic square. Okay. I often show people my pyramid when I have a mystic square in their chart. I see, can you guys see that? So if you have a pyramid here, which means fire in the middle, but if you look at it from an aerial view, you see two oppositions and four squares. Okay. So this is a mystic square. This is fire in the middle. This is your like creative fire, internal fire, creating a structure that encases it so that it can manifest here. So this can be amazing energy. It creates a strength. It creates a power. It creates leaps of evolution. Moon, Pluto, emotional power. This is in the fourth house. This would be the energy of like doing that past life regression, working on ancestor wounds, things like that. So that is the hard aspects. Those are the things that we look at in a chart. Sometimes they just jump right out and then you're like, okay, now I need to read this Pluto, these nodes, and this moon. And then you don't even look at the sun sometimes because what you're looking at is so, that's the story it's trying to tell you. And that's an intuitive hit. You should follow that. So let's look at conjunctions. So these are the nicer aspects. These are aspects where things are powerful. It's a combined energy. It's a power and it's a polarity of both energy. The good and the bad of Jupiter with the good and the bad of Venus, you get those two together and they can manifest in all those ways, in balance to one another, in opposition to one another. Sun conjunctions are actually thought to burn up the other luminary unless it's an inferior conjunction. Now, there are only two planets that can do inferior conjunctions, and that's Venus and Mercury. They have an inferior conjunction between Earth and Sun when they are retrograde, and then they have a superior conjunction when they are on the other side of the Sun. So Venus and Mercury will have two conjunctions during their cycle. Mercury's 116-day cycle, and Venus's 584-day cycle. When you look at the solar system and you see that either Venus or Mercury is between Earth and Sun, then they're probably retrograde in a chart. And these are also very powerful transits. Let's see, right here, I've got a inferior conjunction of Venus. So this is Earth, this is the Sun, this is Mercury and Venus. This is from Earth's perspective when we look at the chart. What we're going to see on the chart is Venus retrograde conjunct the Sun. Whereas when Venus is on the other side, the retrograde mark is gone and she's all the way on the other side of the Sun. Okay, so those are the special kinds of conjunctions you can have. Here we go. We have a Sun-Venus conjunction, but we see a retrograde Venus. So that means this is an inferior conjunction. This is a much more powerful Venus energy than if it was not retrograde, just because of the position of Venus during this person's birth. So whenever Venus does her retrograde motion through Leo, anytime in this person's life, every 8 years, they're going to feel it. Now, if you look at their the Sun-Venus conjunction, it's in a trine with Chiron. So there's some healing here. There's a flow of healing. We've already talked about. So this is the combined energy, right? So you've got Sun-Venus together conjunct in that chart, and it's trine to Chiron. So it's an easy energy. It's the best of both. It's a familiar energy, and it's harmonious. So anytime you see those angles of trines, that is good stuff. Then to top it all off, you put 3 of those trines together and you get what's called a grand trine. And these 3 points form an isosceles triangle. And it's considered an enormous source of strength, cosmic assistance, and alchemical power, and an unstoppable flow of beneficial energy. So let's look at that chart one more time and see what that feels like. You see this person's chart, you see they've got that mystic square, but then you also notice, that Sun-Venus, that Chiron is trine to the Galactic Center, where the center of the Milky Way is, where that veil is thinner, where a source comes through for us through cosmic downloads. It's basically the part of the sky that's associated with the ascended masters. So that kind of changes everything for this Sun-Venus combination into trine to Chiron. We've got tremendous healing coming in from the cosmic with that combination of Sun-Venus. And then there's the sextile, which is the opportunity. It's really never thought of as really, really good or really, really bad, but it's an opportunity. And a lot of people want to take positive opportunities. But if you're not doing your astrology consciously and you're just unconsciously blundering through the world, you may not know that you have a sextile or a doorway or an opportunity to use the energy. You can use the best of it. You can use the worst of it. Let's see. Yeah, we have this sextile between Pluto and Neptune, 12th house, 10th house. This is like surrendering to power. It is having a delusional attitude towards power. It's powerful delusions. I like to read this for the collective as surrendering to the transformation, because everyone alive right now is going through this. They're going through some sort of, alchemical, astrological, divine energy transformation. We're all trying to explain it and express it in our own crazy ways. Then there's minor aspects. And again, if you want to use these, you can. You don't have to. They, in my experience, will literally tell the story just with finer shades. So if there's something that's unclear, sometimes these are helpful to look at. Here's the definitions. A semisextile would be 2 different elements working harmoniously together. The semisquare is a subtle tension that we tend to ignore. So if you are talking with your client and maybe there's like, I don't know, there's something going on, I just can't figure it out, you might want to add the semisquare and it might point to what's happening. Then there's the sesquiquadrate, and it's a challenge. So what are we trying to work and learn to do? The quincunx is what I like to use, is the one I like to use on my charts. And it's an inner potential that's difficult to realize. And then the quintile is talents and potentials. And the quintile, if you have a perfect quintile star, that's pretty potent and interesting. And then there's the starseed Merkaba, which is basically two grand trines flipped over on each other, and it creates this six-pointed star. And if it's perfect, you get six sextiles as well. So whenever you see that pattern in the chart, you want to think about it, and you want to talk about what the points are. A lot of times, the nodes will be a part of a Merkaba. And so their destiny is a big part of it. I always say legacy, like you're here to inherit something, either spiritual, physical, something. When we're looking at aspects of a natal chart, now you guys know the story that the planets are trying to tell you about this person, that they're trying to figure out about themselves. And each natal placement is a unique signature. I mean, no two charts are exactly the same. Even twins won't have the same energy. So you've got your unique pattern, you've got your unique blueprint that is being used in that shadow time on that quantum level in the ether. And it is projecting a reality for your subconscious. It is doing that because of those positions. How you see the world, how you believe things, how you react to certain things is all based on this unique blueprint. And you are projecting that, emitting that, pulsating that outward, while at the same time, the sky, the sun and the moon, and all the luminaries are evolving and moving through their own pattern of time. You can think of it as a spiral moving upward in the dimensions, like they're just twisting in on themselves. And so from time to time, the sky in transit, the thing that we look at every day, will aspect back to your natal resonance. So if Jupiter is in a harmonious aspect, for example, to your natal Jupiter, right? You got Jupiter. Let's make a copy of Jupiter. So let's say the transiting Jupiter is out here somewhere, and it creates one of those beautiful harmonious aspects back to your natal Jupiter. You're like, wow. And you have a wonderful time. You have swelling of abundance. Everything just feels good during this transit. Well, at the same time, Pluto might be doing a square to something in your natal chart, the transiting Pluto. And these transits are called dynamic transits. But then when the transiting planets are moving, they create these dynamic aspects. So a Jupiter square Jupiter will last for days or weeks. The faster moving planets are going to have very, very quick transits. So Moon stays in a sign for like 2 days. Mercury is really quick too. So the transit to your natal energies by a Mercury or a Moon energy is quick and brief. So it usually feels less impactful, less intense. Whereas if a slower moving planet is aspecting, for example, back to your natal moon, like you have Pluto in the sky conjunct your natal moon, because aspecting planets will always aspect back, or transiting planets will always aspect back to your natal planet. So we have this very slow 3 to 5 year transit of Pluto going forward and backwards through its yearly retrograde, pinging your moon. Okay, so if you've got a Pluto aspecting conjunct back to your natal moon, you're having an emotional transformation that lasts about 3 to 5 years. I might experience that Pluto totally differently because it's squaring my moon, or it might be conjunct my Venus. Okay, so you can have very different experiences with a Pluto on the cusp of Sagittarius and Capricorn, which is where Pluto is right now. And I think this is why tropical astrology can feel very accurate, because they do this. This technique is used in all forms of astrology, not just constellational astrology. So if you've been with me so far and you follow tropical, this should make complete sense to you. We still do this. The aspects are correct. The moon phases are correct. Even your houses can be correct when you go from tropical astrology to constellational astrology. This is what personal transits do to your unique individual template. It's how the chords are played. So through that that ether bubble or ether sphere that you create because of your unique template, now it's going to interact with the moving energies. And you get to work with it. You get to see these planets in motion, because once you start doing this for yourself, I'm going to show you a technique at the end that you can do. Once you start doing that for yourself on a regular basis, you will see how the planets move. You'll be able to monitor how you feel. You'll know where your lunar critical degrees are and what days they happen, and when people shouldn't mess with you. You know what I mean? Like today's one of those days for me. I'm in a pretty good mood today, but if someone comes at me, it'll probably not end good and I'll probably cry. So, today's an emotional day for me. I know that because Moon in Leo opposes my my natal moon. And that's what you'll figure out as you watch these planets move. Okay, so this is the current sky right now. And I want to know, how is that going to affect me today? Like what's happening with me today? So what you're going to do is you're going to go to that free chart calculator. You're going to print today's chart so that you have it as a reference, or you're just going to keep it on one window. Then you're going to go back to it or open it up in another window, and then you're going to create your natal chart. So you put your day, your time, your location, and you print your natal chart. So I've done that. So this is mine, and this is the sky right now. And since I can't draw with this software, I went ahead and I brought in these little icons to show you what I did. I would print off my natal chart, and I would literally write in where the stuff is. So for example, Pluto is right on the cusp of Sag and Capricorn. So I put Pluto right here. Pluto's hanging out right here at the edge of my 8th house on my chart, because we're in the exact constellation. Do you see why this has to be exact? If you're using constellational energy, you want to know exactly where things are. Venus is in Scorpio, so she's right here over my Neptune in my 7th house. Let's see, Saturn is in Aquarius, so I put Saturn right here, who's been conjunct my Jupiter for a little bit, in my 10th house. Here's Neptune in Pisces, also in my 10th house. I didn't grab the nodes, but the North Node is over here in my 11th house. Uranus is about to cross over into my ascendant next year. Jupiter, because they're in Taurus, you see that? It's the 6th house on this chart when I generated it, but for me, natally, Jupiter is in my 1st house right now, conjunct my South Node. Okay, so let's see. And then Mars is conjunct my Mercury in Cancer in 2nd house. And Sun is in Virgo, about to enter my 6th house. Mercury's in Libra in my 6th house. Okay, do you see how we did that? So this Mars over here is in the 7th house, but if I write Mars in the constellation that it's associated with today, then I can see what it's affecting in my natal chart. And then I know that there's this opposition. So Pluto is opposing my natal Mercury, because Mars and Pluto are opposing each other in the sky. I hope this is clicking. I hope this is making sense for you. Let's see. Where did we put the moon? The moon is for Leo right here. So the moon just went over my natal sun and is now opposing my natal moon. Remember that critical degree? This is a critical degree for me, you guys, because it always opposes my moon, and it's right after it crosses my sun. So these are emotional days for me. And then if you do this every day, you will notice that the moon is going to move. So every day the moon is in a different spot and accesses different parts of your chart. So this is an emotional awareness, because when you start to do this and you go, how is today emotionally? Oh, I felt this, I felt this. You will notice a pattern, I promise. It's the coolest thing ever. The sun will move 1 degree every day. So you'll see sun move like this around the zodiac. And then what you'll notice with Venus and Mercury is they do this. They go back and forth over the year around the sun. All right, so now you are totally equipped after you've just done that small exercise to begin your notebook. I wonder if I have my notebooks here at fingertips length. I don't. I'm going to get that one day and show it to you guys. My original astrology notebooks, where I did this, and I would date it, and then I would write down the aspects, and I would write down what I was feeling, or if I couldn't get to the astrology, I would at least write down things that would happen, and then I would go back and I would do this, and I would just sit down and I would interpret these energies. So yeah, you guys are the template. You are the natal resonance, and whatever this guy is doing is moving you and pushing you and resonating with you to bring you into alignment, why the aspects matter. Because this is where we are. I put the aspects onto these luminaries. This is the sky right now. Or this will be the new moon on the 1st, actually. So here it is. You can see your new moon trining to Saturn. You can see the opposition with Venus and Jupiter. And when you're in it, you can feel these things. These are energies that are blasting across the zodiac and influencing and affecting. You're right here. What happens with the collective, with you personally, depending on how it hits your natal resonance.
Let me tell you what happens when you are connected to the cosmos. It's different. It changes everything. The squares are not so much tensions and lessons. They're more like, oh my gosh, let's learn this next thing. What do I have to change to do that? And there's a whole bunch of other aspects that are available to me right now that I can use. This is a screenshot from the Apple iPhone app called Night Sky. This is what you get. And you can turn the sky and you can look up, you can look down. My birthday, I said, all right, I've been a Leo my whole life. Let's see what the sun actually looks like in Leo. Because when, it's in your sign, you can't see it because the sun's right there. It blocks out all the stars. It's very bright outside. So I said, all right, let me see what that looks like. And this is where the screen landed when I pointed my iPad directly at the sun. So you can imagine, imagine identifying your sun sign as a Leo your whole entire life. In fact, I think my younger aunt, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, said, Danny, you are a Leo. I said, okay, cool. What's a Leo? And I learned about Leo and I never really felt comfortable in my skin as a Leo. And boy, did my life change when I turned that screen to the sky and I saw, okay, the sun is in Cancer. And I actually checked all the settings to make sure that the app was, set to the right century and all that. And then no, in fact, it was August 4th. A quick tour of some Dr. Danny baby pictures and see if you guys can experience the same amount of joy I did when looking at these. That's me when I took my first breath, still attached to my mother. There's the doctor. I don't even remember his name. It was 1:30 a.m. in the morning in Pinehurst, North Carolina. There is baby Dr. Danny right there. There's me a few months later. Look at those cheeks. Look at that happy baby. Oh my gosh. And then this one made me cry. Look at my beautiful parents. Oh my gosh. They were so young. Do you know how old they were when they had me? They were 20 and 21 years old. So imagine yourself at that age with a young little fireball Dr. Danny in your hands. Where my birthday is actually August 4th, the solar return is August 3rd. And the reason for that is because you want the sun to return to the exact spot in the sky that it was the day you were born, which is 17 degrees of Cancer. So if we go back to my natal chart, you will see that the sun is at 17 degrees of Cancer. So that's what I did. I went ahead and I picked that day. It's about a day before my actual birthday that we celebrate. Let's talk a little bit about the quintile. It is a minor aspect in astrology. And as you can see, you've got this man here standing in the middle of the star that we learned to trace when we were very young. At its perfect points, each of these points are 72 degrees apart. And that is this angle here. And then the angle here between these 2 points on the zodiac chart is 144 degrees. So these are very interesting numbers. You'll find these numbers a lot in numerology, sacred geometry, the sacred geometry of our cosmic matrix, how it holds together. There's so much out there. I couldn't even endeavor to show it all to you, but it's also the number 5. And the number 5 is Venus, right? If you guys have seen my Venus videos, and you haven't seen my Venus, go to the Venus playlist and listen to those videos. I talk a lot throughout all those videos about Venus energy and the number 5. And I think I even go through the star pattern that Venus makes with the Earth and the Sun. Wow, this is really very much synchronous with the Venus energy that I've been working with. So let's take a look at, let's just pretend this is the zodiac ring. And like I said, this angle here between this point and this point is 72 degrees. So the little hashtags that you see on a birth chart, there's 72 of them between this angle right here. So this is 72. And this is 1/5 of 360 degrees, which is the circle. Okay. Then you've got the angle between this point and this point. This is 144. You guys probably know why that's a special number. So this is called the quintile. And this is called the biquintile. Oh my gosh, I'm writing sideways. This is hard. Okay. This structure right here between these 3 points is what we call a yod in astrology. So this is basically like big energy pointing you towards a potential. So if anybody has this pattern in their chart between 5 different luminaries, now granted, if you add enough things to your chart analysis, you will eventually get a perfect pentagram or pentacle. But you know, if you've got the basics and you've got this pattern, then you've got a lot of very interesting energy that may not be explored. So, but it's essentially about a potential that you as the person may not even know you have, but you're literally driven towards it. It's almost like like an unknown, unconscious desire that drives you towards something. So what the hell is a progress chart? When we look at the sky and we do the transits, whenever I talk to you guys about what's happening in the sky, this energy is essentially so alien to us, to our natal resonance, to our natal chart, that when we get encountered by it, we project it to the outside world so that it can be safely assessed by the conscious mind. These are the universal energies. This is like the Venus transits or a full moon read. Sometimes it's called mundane astrology. But progressed is not alien. Progressed has been recorded into your subconscious since the first 90 plus or minus days of your life. And it basically represents your entire life, which is why I say plus or minus 90. Some of us live shorter lives and some of us live longer lives. And when events happen in a progressed chart, transformation evolves and unfolds from the subconscious mind. So it's literally something that wells up in the base of you and then begins manifesting externally. Okay. And it's deeply, deeply personal, which is why the only good example I could give you was my chart. So essentially the way a progress chart works is that one day equals 1 year. So in other words, one progressed moon cycle will take 29 years versus 29 days. And one sun cycle takes 365 years versus days. Now, the moon is the only one that will repeat its cycle 2 to 3 times in the average person's lifespan. I am on my second lunar cycle, and I started at the progressed new moon phase of it, and I've walked myself up to now, and I've looked a little bit in the future, and it's quite profound. And so I wanted to share some of this with y'all so you can understand how important progressed energy might actually be for us. When your progressed sun or any other progressed luminary, because you can not only look at the moon, you can look at the sun, you can look at Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and all the other guys out there don't really move that much in a progressed chart. Because if you think about someone who's 30 years old, how far is Saturn going to move in 30 days? Not much. But the moon will take a whole lap around, right? Or it'll move through a sign. So anytime something changes houses, changes signs, changes direction on your progress chart, it's a big deal. And when you use the real sky, guys, the constellations, how incredibly accurate it is. It's almost spooky. And I'm kind of afraid something's going to happen to this video because I'm talking about the sky and I'm talking about Ophiuchus and I'm talking about this map to your life. Okay, so let's get into what we learn a little bit here. So there are non-natal energies that come from a progressed chart, and then there are natal chart energies. So essentially what I just talked about, the progressed planet changing signs, the progressed planet changing directions, forming a new aspect with other planets, creating, and like I said, this creates like an intense desire from within, like you're driven, like you're guided, like it's from God, it's from the universe. And then there's natal chart energy. So you can compare your progress chart. You can actually put them together in a synastry chart with your natal chart and see what aspects the progress chart is doing to your natal chart. This is a less intense desire to proceed, and it's projected externally, just like transits are. Outer planets really only move a few degrees in one person's lifetime. They tend to form chart-related interactions rather than the non-natal chart-related energies. So in other words, if you've got a Neptune Pluto sextile in your chart, you're going to have a Neptune sextile progress chart. Your entire progress chart will have a Neptune Pluto sextile. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars are the most commonly read non-natal chart energies, the sidereal. So the moon yields predictive information, but does not flavor it with lunar meanings. So the difference between a natal chart and a progress chart is that the moon is literally highlighting the portion of your hero's journey. So essentially what the moon does is it illuminates that sign, house, or planet that it's aspected to, okay? And its phase is also important. So here's the phases of the moon. You have new moon, which is when your progress sun and your progress moon are conjunct together. Then you have the moon moving from in its counterclockwise motion around the wheel, around the zodiac chart, through the crescent moon, the first quarter moon, the gibbous moon, full moon, disseminating moon, last quarter, and balsamic moon. It's like a cycle of harvesting. So essentially in the new moon, you're planting a seed. In the crescent phase, roots are taking place. At the quarter moon, which is a square, is not felt as a square. You know, normally when we're going through regular every month moon cycles, squares are challenges. Squares are a peak of energy that we sometimes get a little exhausted with. But this square essentially means action. It means time to take action because you're going to feel driven within. The gibbous moon is when you start expressing, and the full moon is when you're ready for harvest. You don't start anything new during a full moon, progressed moon. You should be thinking about what you've already done and how to leverage that, because the disseminating moon is when you transfer that to your community. And then the last quarter is retilling the field. And then the balsamic moon is freshening up the soil for the next cycle. Okay. And you only get 2 to 3 of these in your lifetime. So you better make it good. Here's kind of how it, maybe some key words for that energy. So right here you have your new moon, which is emergence, and notice how it's put on a wheel here for you. So you got sun, moon conjunct, new moon, emergence, crescent moon, assertion, first quarter, action, gibbous moon, expression, full moon, fulfillment, disseminating moon, synthesis, third quarter moon, reorientation, balsamic moon, release. Okay, so that's what you're working with on a progressed moon cycle in your life. Now, when you were born, if you weren't born on a new moon, then your next new moon cycle starts whenever that progressed moon reaches that. So for me, my first new moon was when I was about 17. Okay. It can be as late as 26 or 27 years old. So if you were born perhaps right after a progressed new moon or a new moon in your natal chart, then you're going to wait a while before you get a new cycle to start over. And after transiting Scorpio, leaning deep into the intensity of change, the storm is over. There's a moment of simplistic peace, bliss, and healing. The serpents are tamed and they bend to your will. You notice the divine light in all beings, recognizing that they are a part of you. This is where you will level up. As the moon passes through the Galactic Center and eventually into Sagittarius, your soul can commune with the divine. This is changing timelines, jumping realities, and knowing the true power you've always had. The finger of fate or the finger of God. So here it is. I basically put a little PowerPoint slide together for you guys. I'm going to get my pen out. And what you see here is aspect lines. So what an aspect means is the relationship that planets are making with each other. In this particular chart, we're going to have Jupiter with Uranus, and we're going to have Venus with Saturn. And then down here, we're going to have the South Node. And then a day after the full moon, the moon's going to move into this space. So what this means is that there's a sextile between these two planets. So this is the skill. So if this is in your birth chart, this is a great way to interpret a yod in your chart. The sextile indicates the skill that you have, the energy between these two planets. The challenge comes from what's called the quincunx. So I think this is like 60 degrees, I want to say. This is 150 degrees. And so the challenge is bringing the energy of, let's say, Jupiter in Aries with the South Node in Virgo and what that energy means. There's usually a subtle tension that's very hard to ignore with a quincunx. And in medical astrology, the quincunx is huge. Like, it's actually a more important aspect than even a square. So the two challenges are bringing this skill to bear with this challenge. And so the mission is here. Okay. Now, in the chart that we're working with for the full moon, the lunar eclipse, we've got what's called a boomerang yod. And so not only do you have the original pointed finger, you've also got a opposition between Chiron, which is next to the North Node up here. So you have Chiron and North Node with Moon and South Node down here. So you get skill, challenge, mission, and then action, reaction. Okay. And when we look at the chart, I'll go into that a little bit more. I brought this graphic forward into the actual chart. So the interesting thing about yods is that a yod is traditionally known as the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's also the smallest. Now, I'm not saying I'm an expert. This is just stuff I, looked up. And in Jewish mystical traditions, the yod represents a dot, a divine point of energy. It's the spark or the spirit of everything that comes down to earth. Okay? So a person born with a yod in their chart, a lot of astrologers consider them spiritual warriors or fated or guide people that have a lot of problems when they first start out. But then once they get through their challenges, they know their mission and the universe typically supports them in a big way. So
okay, let's talk about time zones. So when you see a time zone from the other side of the world, for example, those of you in New Zealand, when I put 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, that might not mean a lot for you. But when I put the notation -5 UTC, I'm going to show you how to use that so that all of you can start, whenever you set up any meetings or anything like that, you can use the UTC abbreviation. And most people that are serious about wanting to know where they are in time and space will also know this. And so will you now. My time zone, for example, just for this quick point I want to make, and then I'm going to show you time and date and how you can get which time zone you're in and what that means. UTC is always right at the prime meridian. It's a longitude point in space on our map. It goes through Greenwich, England, and it is literally where it's time zero. So UTC 0 would be the prime meridian, and UTC never actually changes from daylight to standard time like a lot of countries do. It stays with standard time. So, for example, where I am right now in Central Daylight Time in the United States, in about a week, we go back to Central Standard Time. So a lot of us have 2 time zone abbreviations. We'll have our daylight and we'll have our standard time. So currently we're in daylight time, and that is -5 from the UTC, meaning that the prime meridian, that longitude, it is currently 5 hours ahead of me. So if you take the prime meridian and it's 0, in my time zone, I'm a negative from the UTC. Now, if you live in Australia, you're going to be like +12 or +8, somewhere around there with your UTC time. So if it's 3 p.m. there, then it would be +11 or +12 UTC. We'll look at it in a second. Regardless of whether you're using daylight If you're using daylight, it's -5 for us. If we go to standard time, because the clocks go backwards, then it's -6. So my time zone changes from -5 to -6 UTC in about a week and a half. So let's take a look at this website, Time and Date. It's an awesome resource for you guys to look at time zones. You can go by alphabetical order where you live, and what it'll do is it'll give you your UTC and what time it is in universal coordinated time. So, for example, let's say you're in Central Daylight right here, it's UTC -5. But when I go to Central Standard Time, which will be right here, or Central Time, it'll be -6. Let's see if we can find Queensland, Australia. Australian Western Daylight and Australian Standard. Yeah, so that would be +9. You can see how it's +9, and it's like so the way that we would do it in order to coordinate our time zones between Australian Western Daylight Time and Central Daylight Time in the United States, we would take -5 +9, and we would say to each other, "Okay, my Australian friend, you are 14 hours ahead of me." I hope that makes sense, because I am -5 and they are +9. So we are 14 hours apart. So if I say, let's meet at 7 p.m. my time, we should know immediately how many hours my Australian friend would need to calculate. That way you can also give the person that you're trying to meet the time for them. If you know exactly what time zone they're in, you can go to the UTC and you can figure out how many hours apart you actually are. Here's another way you can look at it. This is, if you go to Time and Date, it usually knows where you are because that's how the internet is. It knows exactly where you are all the time. So it will give me certain UTC time. So, for example, Eastern time, which is New York, is -4 UTC, and London is +1. When you look at like a world map here, this is obviously, not done to scale. It's distorted a little bit, but it gives you an idea of how they do the time zones. The time zones are basically 15 degrees of longitude. You can calculate 15 degrees into nautical miles, but when you get to land, they break it up a little bit. They tend to have these lines follow rivers or state lines or country borders and things like that, just so that everybody in the country is the same time zone. This is a nice little conversion chart too. So if, for example, you know that you're -5 and my friend is +8, 9 p.m. For me would be, we would just follow this over. You guys should screenshot this, and it would be 10 a.m. Okay, so that's how you can use this chart. This was provided by copradar.com. So that's where I got that. Yep, let's talk about critical degrees now. When we talk about critical degrees, we're talking about the very last degree of one sign and the very first degree of the next sign. So basically right there, like between 1 and 29, depending on what resource you read, some will say exactly 0 degrees. It's often called cusp energy as well. And what you get is you get an extreme rush of power. And so it's like it's the very end of a constellation. It's the planet's sort of last hoorah or party with that particular constellation. And now they're moving into a new energy. And so you can kind of think of, as a planet moves through the constellation, it's going through an evolving process. So it goes in there and it might, in the first few degrees, it might not quite feel the energy. It might feel a little bit foreign to that particular planet. But then as we move forward and further into that particular constellation, by the time we get to the end, if the lessons are not learned, if the evolution hasn't taken place, then we get a little bit of a challenge with the last degree. And a lot of times people will also use that in natal charts, but I feel like I'm not really sure why this is, but I feel like cusp energy in a natal chart tends to be a little less intense. And it could be, like, for the person, as a blend of the two energies, not as extreme when it comes into a natal chart, but with the dynamic aspects. When something's actually in motion, which is what we are studying here, we're looking at the planets in motion so that we can see what lessons, what sort of guidance, what waves of energy are coming towards us. Then we might want to look at these critical degrees, the first and the last degrees of a constellation. Also, eclipse points. So if you're within a year of any eclipses occurring in any degrees of your constellation, those might also be critical degrees for the moon, for the sun, okay? Also, fixed star conjunctions within a 1-degree orb. I think those are also critical degrees, and it really just depends on the nature of the star.
It comes and goes, comes in cycles, and I believe it's related to the cosmos. I really do, which is one of the reasons why I started looking into astronomy and astrology, because I would notice that there were cycles, ebbs and flows of certain types of energy in medicine and how patients present and the problems that they have. So if you read any astrology textbook on eclipse events, what you'll find is that whenever the moon hits the eclipse point degree, so whenever that new moon for the eclipse happened, when the moon repeats that particular critical degree each month before and after that eclipse, there can be energetic impacts. Eclipses are predictable. We can absolutely precisely predict the time to the second and the location. So we know where they are. We know when they're coming. We can look in the sky and see where they're going to be happening in terms of the constellation and the aspects that are happening. We can give you a general read. But for the most part, eclipses are super personal. What I did is I've been analyzing the eclipse points since the last eclipse, the last 3 months. And there are energetic themes for me personally. And they are less and less impactful the farther away from the event that you get. And there's a reason for this. This is actually a thing. This is actually a real phenomenon. I'm not making this up. There's an idea in physics that time is not linear. That when you look in, when you do multidimensional mathematics, time can go forward and time can go backward. In fact, there actually is really, in those types of dimensions, past, present, and future exist all at once. And there's a spiraling phenomenon with space-time and time-space that helps to account for this. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to confuse you, but I want you to understand that you have to sort of let go of the idea that time is linear, that it's causal. So normally we think of, I do something now and the effect happens later. In multidimensional physics, something can happen later and it can affect you now. Space-time, time-space is all one thing. The only reason we perceive it as a linear phenomenon is because of our senses. Our spirit, our etheric body, all of that, it perceives time exactly like it should. It's only our mind, because it processes the senses, the inputs that we get, and it gives us a slice of life one at a time. And we feel that linearly. Eclipses are energetic events, so they cause fluctuations in space-time, and those fluctuations will ripple outward in time-space in all directions, in all dimensions. That means forward in time, that means backward in time. Every time the moon hits that critical degree where the eclipse is, there is going to be a repeating energetic theme. As you move away from the eclipse in linear time, the energy attenuates, meaning it gets less and less intense. Just as if you were to approach an energetic event, the energy increases. And I think that's fantastic because we can look at these energetically, astrologically, and get ready and get prepared for it and use a little bit of energy and see how that feels and see how we want to do it. And then when the next one comes, we're like, okay, now we know how to do this. All right. And this spiral basically represents the idea that past, present, and future are the same. So you can have an event in the future right here and feel it in the present. Just as you can have something happen in the past and still feel it in the present.
Okay. So I want everybody watching right now, anybody that watches later, I want you to imagine yourself in Middle America 4,000 years ago. And it is the winter solstice. So it's December solstice, whatever that day of the year was for them. I don't know Mayan calendars all that well, like to the exact day, but let's just imagine we're this Mayan shaman and we're sitting on our temple and this is right before dawn. Okay. So we're looking at the eastern sky. We're looking at the winter December solstice or whatever day, month that was for them. And you see this amazing picture of the Galactic Center. That's where it is. It's bright enough so that as the sun is rising, which will be the shortest day of the year for them, right before that day. This is basically the last day the sun comes up in its shortest span of time. So that they're watching the sun. They're hoping that it comes back. They're doing rituals around this time frame. And the image that they see in the sky right before dawn is this galactic center. And you also have to understand that they didn't have electric light like we do. They literally just observe the stars and the nebula and the clouds. That was their light, and the moon. So imagine a new moon, December solstice, winter solstice, right before dawn, looking east, and you see the galactic center, the Milky Way. This is such a powerful sight. They associated a lot of their mythology and imagery to the galactic center. This was where in the rituals, the shamans would lick the toad, eat the mushrooms, they would go into the trance, into the bliss state, and they would go here. They would go through the portal of this galactic center to meet with the elders and the wisdom keepers and the Akashic records, and they would bring back wisdom. And this was their journey. This was Xibalba. This was the dark road. Every time a solstice comes, a winter solstice, what you're basically seeing is the declination of the sun going down, down, down every day, every month. This would be summer solstice, when the sun is way up here and high in the sky, and then the December solstice would be here in the middle of the spiral. So each month you would take a snapshot of the sky while the sun is in mid-heaven, and you would see the sun go down, and you would see the sun go back up through the seasons, through the years, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So these points in time, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, when the sun is at its zenith, highest in the sky, and the time when it's highest in the sky during the winter solstice, there's a huge difference. Okay. And they would watch this and they would observe the sun's motions, and they observed a spiral that would expand outward after the winter solstice and then contract inward as we approached the winter solstice. So as we leave the winter solstice, we get to the summer solstice, and then the summer solstice winds down to the winter solstice. Okay. So you see there's a beginning and an end here. Here's another way to look at it. This is right from my Ophiuchus slide deck. So this is the sun's path on the summer solstice, and then the path on the equinox, and then the path on the winter solstice. And you're the observer here looking at the stellosphere. And this is where this imagery comes from, the coiling snake. So when it's cold, when it's dark, the snake is coiled up tightly in its spaces, okay? And then as it warms up, the snake uncoils, loosens up a little bit, and allows the energy to flow in. This is what the Mayans were watching. These people were not stupid either. They created an entire calendar. There was nothing primitive about their mathematics, about their counting system, or about their ability to watch the heavens and keep track of it. In fact, they knew when certain energies were coming. So imagine you're this Mayan shaman elder, and you have your initiates, your apprentices, and you're teaching them the sky. What you notice over time is that moment of the winter solstice, that moment before dawn, the great mother serpent in the sky, the Xibalba, the galactic rift, the dark road, is approaching the horizon every year, slowly, imperceptibly, over decades. Okay? But they're noticing it because they're keeping track of it. And this was how they were able to develop their long count calendar. So they were able to do these mathematical calculations based on the movements they were observing through generations of records kept by shamans about the movement of the galactic center with relationship to the winter solstice sunrise. They were watching this. This is the energy. This shaman says, yeah, my great-great-great-grandfather saw the rift higher. It was higher in the sky during this dawn. Do you see this, young children? I want you to watch this throughout your life so that you can see the galactic rift falling down, down, down during each winter solstice. So they observed this. They kept records. They kept track of it. And that's exactly what they were predicting for this 2012 timeframe. Do you see how we can't really use tropical astrology and understand this greater cosmic cycle? Because they leave out the Galactic Center. They leave out Ophiuchus. They leave out this higher path, this path of transcendence, because for them, for this culture, this was the portal in and out. This is also what I teach. This is my hero's journey with this kind of astrology, with constellational astrology. It does not start in Aries. It starts in Scorpio and it goes clockwise and it ends. So it starts and ends at the Milky Way center. It starts and ends at the galactic rift. It starts and ends at the dark road. And I think the way the ancient, why do I care about the Mayans? Well, these beautiful people kept track of the sky. They were star shaman. Their medicine was in the stars. And they predicted a great transformation of the ages that was right now. And you guys, we are on the cusp of this. All right. We are those of you that follow my channel and Athen and Ike and Uma and are doing this kind of astrology. You guys are the very first elders reconnecting with this knowledge. 20 generations later, look, it's further down. My great-great-grandfathers told me of this. And so they're watching it and they're making calculations and they're predicting. If we go to year 1 on the solstice, we see that the sun is actually entering into Capricorn. But this was 2023 years ago. Okay. What does it look like now? So this will be next month on 12/22 of 2024. The sun will be right at the galactic center within just over 3 degrees. Okay. So what's the difference? So the sun moved in a almost retrograde fashion in terms of the larger cosmic cycle over the last 2,000 years, the particular point that we're interested in, which is the winter solstice for the northern hemisphere. This sun, this moment in time aligned with our sun and the tilt of the planet, it was back in Capricorn. Whereas today, it's right here at the rift. So for the Mayans to calculate something like this 4,000 years ago, they got it pretty darn close because it didn't look that much different 12 years ago. Okay, they did predict the coming of a new age, of a new cosmological age, because as the sky drifts because of precession, as cultures move from different parts of the globe, at least in the past, and as we as humans move from the earth to other realms, other planets, our cosmology will change. We are a starward focused collective right now. That's where we're going. The stars are our home. We're just learning lessons here on earth. We're about to go out there. Okay. So we need to be cosmically focused. We need to be looking at the stars. We need to know where we are in relationship to all the other energies around us, not just the solar seasons that are happening on earth, not just the calendar that humans have created for our pleasure. Okay. We need to be feeling into these energies because this is how you connect with sources, this is how you connect with the higher vibrations that are available to you. But the sky slips and it's imperceptible. The rate of precession, you guys, is 1 degree every 72 years. That's a huge amount of time that in one lifetime, you're really not going to notice it. All right. So let me tell you a story about our solar system. And this is not my story. I did not come up with it. This is sort of the collective's channel downloads. I mean, you can get this from a lot of different sources, a lot of people that have, gone inward or tapped into source and have gotten this information. But what we do know is that there is an asteroid belt right here in our solar system between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. You can't see it on this particular graphic, but I mean, if you look at the relative sizes of these distant orbits, it's almost as if there should be something right here. Just seems like it would make sense. And there is something odd mathematically about Earth's particular orbit, as well as the rotation velocities of our inner planet. Something catastrophic happened here a long time ago. So a lot of times scientists will theorize when they've got present evidence of what might have happened for it to get that way. And we have, billions of asteroids just right here hanging out between Mars and Jupiter. And so the idea was that there was this planet that was there, and something came into our solar system and caused a catastrophic either collision of worlds or a destabilization of somebody's orbit, and this planet ended up being destroyed. Sort of the cosmological mythology, the cosmological trauma that I'm sensing that happened was that this place, this world, I think a lot of people call it Tiamat, was this beautiful paradise world, a divine feminine world with no moon, a very steady sun. They didn't have seasons. It was always nice outside. Everything was plenty. And it was dominated by feminine energy. It was a matriarchal type of society. In other words, women didn't ovulate monthly. They didn't have pain with their birth. They could decide whether they wanted to get pregnant or not. It was like they had control over their own fertility and their own cycles within their bodies. And then we had this solar system cataclysm, this crazy catastrophic events that literally busted that planet into shards, into pieces. And those shards, those asteroids, and I would say also too, maybe some of those trans-Neptunian objects are all named after divine feminine archetypes. And I think that's very interesting because, when we think of Venus as the divine feminine archetype of our basic 7 planets, what we're noticing in the current cosmological age, and as we move forward, we're discovering more and more of these bodies that are, the same size or larger than Pluto or our moon. And so why don't they have just as much importance? And so they're given these god names, which are most of them divine feminine archetypes. And so it just leads, the next conclusion I come to when I think about all of this is that they're representing this fractured, fractalized, shattered divine feminine energy. Think of the poor fractured soul with all these just pieces out there in the ether, in the cosmos, little ice worlds, dead, no fire, no heat, no passion. And they're all scattered about. And we're as a collective gaining a greater awareness of them one by one. So we're gaining the awareness of the feminine energy piece by piece. And each one has a certain aspect that is unique to divine feminine. The 2 that I use in my chart, and I stop there, is Lilith and Black Moon Lilith. And Lilith is the only asteroid, and Black Moon Lilith is a point of Black Moon or Asteroid Lilith's orbit. So Asteroid Lilith lives out here between Mars and Jupiter. She takes 4 years to orbit. And she's got an elliptical orbit. So imagine this is not quite a perfect circle. So she's a little wobbly. And the point at which she rotates, or which she orbits, where she is farther away from the sun than when she's closer to the sun, is called the apogee point. So when she's really far away from the sun in the elliptical orbit, it's the apogee point. And when she's really close to the sun, it's the perigee point. The apogee point also slowly precesses around the solar system. It takes about 8 years for it to do that. Okay, so that point is called Black Moon Lilith. So let's dive into some of these archetypes and see what they feel like. So this is the progenitor planet, the pre-Earth Tiamat, Maldek, whatever Brenda, you were right that I think I've heard Maldek before. I think Maldek was the the pre-Mars planet. At any rate, who knows? I mean, I wasn't there, but I like this story. I like this cosmological mythology. It explains a lot about our current collective psyche and what we all sort of go through and deal with and grapple with. So imagine this planet, this place. It's divine feminine, steady sun, no moon, the divine feminine freely expressed. There's nothing dark or scary or terrible about it. This is literally paradise. And then along comes this destruction, this destructive force that scatters and fractalizes that planet, that home world, that the essence, the spirit of that planet is now in shards and scattered throughout the solar system. It could have been the Phoenix or Nemesis X or Nibiru. It could have been a nuclear explosion. Who knows? The way it could have manifested. I mean, infinite possibilities. But you get the picture. And so then we get what's left is this divine spark of feminine creation and the instinctual energy of our sacred masculine, which is protection, which is Saturn. Let's build up and protect and care for and viciously protect this spark. This is the only place that the masculine could go once the divine feminine was shattered across the solar system. So this is what we get. We get this future. We get this sterile technological society with no spark of creation, innovation, invention, the stuff that makes you laugh, the stuff that makes you feel good, all those divine feminine qualities. If we were to go to the extreme of this cosmic trauma, because this is what you get. You get Black Moon Lilith. You get this suppressed, untamed, wild, divine feminine energy, this creation energy. This is the primordial mother that births creation from herself. There's no seed here. It's literally just creation creating herself. And it's angry because it's been destroyed. It's been traumatized. It's been burned. It's been scattered. So it's very potentially a source of our trauma, of our wounds, especially in very, very vulnerable, painful situations. That's what Black Moon Lilith can represent. Now, if you've got access to this energy without the trauma, without the wounding, then you also have access to some very powerful, creative, and destructive energy that one might think is evil or wicked right off the bat. It's the source of chaos magic. It's not emotional. It knows its power. It's definitely a far cry from this. But this is what happens when we have a cosmic trauma like this and we go from one extreme to the other. So however this manifests for you as pain and trauma or the sexy seductress, this is the energy of the Black Moon Lilith. It is not reasonable. It is not to be reasoned with. It will burn you or it will embrace you. It will cut you or it will excite you. It's just literally that raw passion, and it's reminiscent to me of Plutonian energy, but specifically divine feminine. So this is what we get. We get this separation. This is the separation that occurred during this cosmic trauma. There's this beautiful love and light spiritual energy, but then there's also this painful separation, loss, grief, fractalization, when we actually have to walk this line right here in the middle. And when we have to say, I don't know, and I don't care. Because if we can manifest or express and refine both of these energies, the divine feminine and the sacred masculine, if we can allow the expression of the Black Moon Lilith and Asteroid Lilith, and also embrace the Saturnian masculine energies, we can literally be magicians. This is a sort of a post techno society where we incorporate technology into our magic, harmonized with the energies of creation, of the energies of change and transformation. So you can see the difference here. This is a group of men and women. This is technology and nature. And this is what the realization or the allowing of that untamed, suppressed, wild feminine energy to come up without judgment, without fear that you'll be abandoned or broken because of it. For Asteroid Lilith, she speaks to our instincts. She's got a pretty steady elliptical orbit that, precesses in a regular fashion. And I feel like her energy will speak to us through our physical instincts. So when, let's say you've got Lilith asteroid in Virgo, Virgo is about the gut. And so when you are going against your true basic foundational creative spirit, which is basically the suppressed, Black Moon Lilith energy, when you're going against it, you're going to get a hit in your gut. You're going to feel it in your gut. You're also going to know when you're doing a good thing because you're going to feel that in your gut too. If you were someone who perhaps has it in Libra, has asteroid Lilith in Libra, you're going to maybe have back pain, kidney pain, ovary problems. If you look at it, you can see where the signs, what body parts are related to it. So like a Black Moon Lilith in Cancer would be breast and lungs. A Black Moon Lilith in Aries would be head pain, head tinglings. A Black Moon Lilith in Taurus would be you get hits in your throat, you get choked up or something like that. So feet problems if it's in Pisces. So you can look at where we'll look at a chart, and I'll show you what the glyphs are for the Black Moon Lilith and Asteroid Lilith, and you can also look in your chart. All right, so here's how we do it. So I showed you that book. This is Horary Astrology. So it's basically a branch of astrology where we answer specific questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast a chart at the exact time the question is asked. So when we're ready, I will put it to you guys that are watching. I will say, give me a question, and then we'll choose. We'll pick a question, and then the moment that question's asked, I will cast a chart. And based on the positions of the planet and the ascendant, we should be able to give you some sort of insight into that question. At least that's the goal. So for this one, I don't need to know where your stuff is. I don't need to know your sun. I don't need to know your moon. I don't need to know your rising. I don't need any of that. You can keep all that to yourself. What we're going to do is basically just ask the question right now of the sky and see what we come up with. And I'm going to show you a pretty cool example that I went through while I was putting this presentation together to give you an idea of how it actually works. So it's only concerned with the question itself, and we'll do a little analysis of the sky right now to see if it's something that is a good question. We'll ask ourselves first, is it a good question before we'll actually answer it? What we want, like it might say now's not a good time to answer that question, or it might say there isn't enough information, or it might say there's nothing you can do about it right now. You want to ask a very clear and focused question. I think this applies to tarot as well. So the clearer the question, the clearer the answer. The more specific the question, the more specific the answer will be. So for example, will I get the job I interviewed for? Is better than what does my career look like? There are ways we can do that with astrology. Like we can look at your natal chart and we can dive really deep into it and see what we come up with. But for this type of astrology where we just look at the sky, we want to ask a really specific question. All right, so you also want to phrase it properly. So it's more of a yes or no, positive or negative, either or type of a question. So you want to avoid the hypothetical philosophical questions like, will the aliens be friendly to us? Or what will happen to religion over the next 20 years? Those are questions that are just kind of too big right now. But will I find my lost pet rather than what's going to happen to my pet is more of a specific type of question. So that's how you want to phrase it. That's really simple. The other thing you want to watch out for or just think about before you go ahead and start typing a question is, what are your intentions? My intentions are vibrating out there to all of you to provide you an answer that will help you. That is my intention. Okay. And so what's your intention? Is your intention to, just see if I can get it right? That we may not get a good answer. But if you genuinely want an answer and feel invested in the outcome, so if it's about something for you, then that's a really good question to ask. So anything superficial or insincere may lead to unclear results. So if remember, if you're coming at it like that, then you might not get the answer you're looking for. Okay. You'll get something, but it might not be the answer we're looking for. And any emotional involvement in the question tends to strengthen the accuracy of the answer, because remember, emotions come from our heart space and our intuition and that right side of our brain. So we ask the question with a sincere heart and gratitude, and then then the question can be answered in a more specific and helpful way. Are
Mhm.
you ready for the answer? Okay, so consider whether the question that's being asked is at the right time. Is it premature? Is it too late? Astrologers will also, there's a little technique that I'll do for your questions, and I'll do it in the open to assess whether you are genuinely prepared for the answer, and also whether it will actually guide you or be purposeful for you. So a lot of times, we won't put that step in the open. We'll just say we can't ask that question right now, or it's too soon to tell. Whereas tonight, I'm actually going to say, well, because this is over here and this is over here, this tells me that the answer is unclear right now. So I'm going to give you the reason why, if that makes sense. So questions asked out of idle curiosity or impulsivity might not yield insightful or radical, which means root or foundational result. And the first thing you're going to do with the chart is identify the ascendant, the constellation that is rising, and that is you, the questioner. Okay. And then what you do is you assign a ruling planet of the ascendant to the questioner. So, for example, if the rising sign is Gemini, then Mercury would be the ruling planet and would be the significator of the querent, or basically the one who is the questioner. That's what this, archaic terminology basically means. When you see significator, that is the questioner. That is the person that needs the answer. So the whatever planet, like let's say it's Mercury, Mercury is the significator of you, the questioner. And we use traditional rulerships, by the way. So we are going to leave out the rulerships of Uranus and Pluto and Chiron. It's going to be everything from Saturn inward. So then you analyze the condition of the significator. So where is Venus? What house is she in? Or Mercury? Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So if we have Gemini rising, we're using Mercury. We analyze the condition of the significator, the house location, the sign, and the aspects of that significator. So I said, okay, let's try this out. Let's see how this is going to go. And so I said, will this presentation be well received? And I cast the chart, and this is what I got. It was 2:10 p.m. yesterday afternoon, and this is the sky the exact moment I asked the question. And I put these little icons here to remind you of who the rulerships are as we analyze this chart, so that when I say, this is a Mercury energy, when I point to Virgo, you know why. And we are using traditional rulerships. So Aquarius is not ruled by Uranus in this particular analysis, but we are using the actual sky, and we are using the actual constellations. This chart represents that energy. So, for example, the rising sign, the moment I asked this question, was Pisces, right at those first degrees. Okay. So, right there at the 0 degree of Pisces,
Yeah.
was on the ascendant. And so, Jupiter is me. That's the questioner.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Jupiter, I am the questioner at this moment. Now, that will change. So, you want to look at where Jupiter is and its condition. So Jupiter is currently in Taurus, or was yesterday, retrograde in the 3rd house. Okay. So it kind of matched, because I was asking about a presentation, and the 3rd house is about knowledge and learning.
And
Okay. So that was
communication.
perfect. Yeah. And communication.
Yeah.
And then Jupiter
Mhm.
is in a balance with Mercury in Ophiuchus, racing towards us. Right. And
Mm.
remember from our Mars class that, Mars rules the stars of Ophiuchus and Scorpio in this traditional analysis. So Mars over Mercury is like astrology. So we're balancing astrology with this practical knowledge. So this feels good. I'm like, okay, I like this. But then there's this weird like T square to Saturn. Saturn always kind of gets in there and, kind of brings a little bit of tension. So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, what is this tension? So Saturn is structures. Saturn is the teacher too, right? In Aquarius, you could even say Saturn is teaching the new age energy, right? So all those things can apply with this particular energy. We also have Saturn, or in Aquarius, on the ascendant during the time of this question as well. So there's a lot of strong Jupiter Saturn energy. You've got Saturn squaring Jupiter from Venus's domicile. Venus, where's Venus? Venus is in Sagittarius, in Jupiter's house. So Jupiter and Venus have this sort of dispositor relationship, right? Venus rules Taurus, Jupiter's in Taurus. Jupiter rules Sag, Venus is in Sag, right? So you guys see that relationship, and then I'm the questioner. So I've got a lot of nice, abundant, creative thoughts that are spiritually aligned to my purpose. Okay, but there's some tension here with this Saturn. Am I doing it responsibly? Am I bringing in the information? It may be just a little bit of tension of getting the slides together and doing all the little work, the bones to build the process. So it feels good, but there's some energy there that might be some tension. So there's other ways that you can analyze the chart. So far, it feels pretty good. I feel like you guys are receiving it very nicely. But then you have to ask, we look at the houses for the significator of the object of the question. So the analysis about where I stand in terms of getting this presentation out to an audience that's receptive and having it be well received is nice. But what about the presentation itself? And so you have to decide which house is associated with this particular question, and that would be the presentation. So here you can look at this list if you want to screenshot it. I don't necessarily have to read through it. Hopefully all of you guys are, at least a little bit curious about astrology and have a general idea of the energy of the houses. But if it's a question about relationships, for example, if you type a question in there about a relationship, we're going to look at the 7th house. We're going to read that energy. We're going to see what planets are in there. We're going to see what rules that energy based on the constellation that's over the current 7th house. If you ask me about your hopes and dreams, then I'm going to look in the 11th house. If you ask about the ending of something, then we're going to look in the 4th house. Okay. So I've highlighted basically the 10th house and the 3rd house as potential energies for a presentation to an audience through the vehicle of what I do for a living. So let's look back at our chart. And we've got the topic, which is the 3rd and 10th house. So it's, what's ruling the 10th house? Well, in the 10th house, we have Venus and Jupiter. So that's all very good. And then let's see. Then we have the 3rd house, which is ruled by Venus. So yeah, this speaks very good to the question itself. Okay, so all of it's lining up pretty good, but I'm still feeling some tension in this energy. So there's one more piece that I have to ferret out. And I have to decide if the question is actually a good question in the first place. Okay. And that's asking if the chart is actually radical. Is the question radical? That means is it a good time to ask the question? Is it a pertinent question? Is it an authentic question? Like, is it relevant and valid? So we have to look at that. What is the Lord of the hour? Okay. For some of you, you may know this, but others of you may not know this. And in astrology, you can do this. You can assign, not only do we have days of the week that are associated with certain planets, but we also have hours that are associated with the planets. And they use the traditional 7 luminaries. So Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. So today is Tuesday. So the first hour of Tuesday is Mars. The second hour is Sun. The third hour is Venus, hence 4th. Okay. So this is tonight. I think the hour will be, it's Jupiter's hour right now, which is super awesome. But on Monday, when I was doing the presentation, it was Saturn's hour. Okay, so it's Saturn's hour. He's usually a malefic in these traditional analyses. He usually causes constrictions, delays, frustrations. So I was like, oh, great. Saturn is the Lord of the hour. And, I've got this T square going on with Mercury and Ophiuchus and Jupiter down there in the 3rd house. This is so beautiful. What is Saturn trying to tell me? So there's some constriction, there's delays. So what am I dealing with here? So here are the other things that you can check. So is the Lord of the hour the same as the Lord of the ascendant? And the answer is in this chart, no, right? But kind of, because it's cuspy. I mean, if I had asked the question 30 minutes before, then Saturn would have been on the ascendant, the Lord of the hour, and the Lord of the ascendant. So to actually have the planet on the ascendant and be the Lord of the ascendant and be the Lord of the hour would have been pretty powerful Saturn energy coming through on that question, right? But I asked it just a little bit later, and so now we're moving into Jupiter energy. But since Saturn was the Lord of the hour, having actual freaking Saturn on the ascendant bears actually pretty good. It means it's a powerful question. It's a relevant question. to the energy of Saturn's domain. So there's similar temperaments here. You want to look and see where the moon is. So if the moon is in close aspect to the Lord of the hour, that might mean that it's a good question. If the Lord of the hour, which in this case is Saturn, is close to the ascendant, then it is a good question, and that is what we have. So in this particular chart, we've met that criteria. The Lord of the hour, Saturn, is on the ascendant. So this is a good question to ask. Okay. Very, very good questions. Okay. So then you can also ask, is the Lord of the hour in an angular house? Well, we have another yes on that, right? Because we're in sort of this angle of the chart, the eastern angle, the rising. So the Lord of the hour is in fact in an angle. So 3 hits for, is this a good question? And then you ask, is the Lord of the hour the significator of the question? And our question was based in the 3rd house, and our question was based on Mercury and Jupiter. So yes, those were both involved. And then are the signs and the houses of the process equally aligned? And yes, all of that is yes, 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 yes. So this is a good question to ask. The energy feels good, but I still haven't quite explained this tension with Saturn. I still haven't explained that. That's still there. And so I went a little deeper, and there's just a few more things that you can kind of check on a chart to see if that tension bears out or what it might mean for you. And so if the ascendant is in the first degrees of the sign, it's too soon to ask. Hopefully some light bulbs are going off. I'll say it again. If the ascendant is in the first 3 degrees, then it's too soon to ask. So when I asked the question, when I logged my question time and I looked at everything, it was indeed too soon to ask because I was only on slide number freaking 8 instead of being, almost finished with it. So I thought that was super interesting. And I said, okay, that actually makes sense to me. Um, Now, you can look at that and say, okay, the question's too soon, or you can look at the last 3 degrees. If the ascendant's in the last 3 degrees, then the questioner is trying to cheat the astrologer. Despair will ensue. There'll be endings, crises, and eagerness. And if the Lord of the 7th house is afflicted, the astrologer will have difficulty. And if Saturn's in the 10th house during the questioning, the answer will cause the astrologer to be besmirched. So the North Node brings assistance, and the South Node is unlucky and helpless. So too soon to ask the question. So what I did is I forwarded it in time to the end of the presentation, and I said, is this going to be well received? And then everything lined up. Yes, the T-square was still there, but it was moved up. It was less important, and Jupiter's right in the middle there. The North Node's right there, bringing us help as well. So that is my presentation